Hey, how's it going, everybody, and welcome back into the SFS channel. My name's Gavin, and today with Monday Night Football on the books, we're getting rolling right into week 2 here for 2021 fantasy football action with 5 must-start wide receivers for this week's coming games. I love these players' matchups, their potential increased volume and utilization in their offenses with some changing dynamics following those week 1 games. So, without further ado, drop down, give today's video a like, subscribe to the channel if you're new around here. We're trying to hit 2,000 subscribers really soon here. We've been plugging away and making our way towards that goal, and that'd be awesome if you'd help us out and do that. But without further ado, let's hit that intro and get straight into our players. Again, as we get into today's video, make sure to hit that subscribe button. I'll be doing must-start videos for running backs and wide receivers every single week this fantasy season, in addition to doing some must-sit players as well and helping you avoid some tough matchups in unfavorable situations in your lineups that could end up being pretty costly in your fantasy matchups every week. So this first player I get really excited about this coming week here. Tyler Lockett was a beast in a matchup that I thought was very unfavorable in week 1. The Colts defense has been predicated around stopping players from getting deep and penetrating the last level of their secondary. Lockett went nuts. He was able to blow the top off that defense multiple times and have a really strong fantasy game. This week he's got the Titans. If you watched the Titans get absolutely flamed last week by the Cardinals, you know their secondary is not the strength of that team, and you know that this is a very susceptible unit to deep passing, which is Tyler Lockett's strength. Christian Kirk had 2 receiving touchdowns last week. He was able to take a deep one off the top of that defense, and I think Tyler Lockett is a much better player and is much more well-suited with a quarterback in Russell Wilson to go out here and potentially have back-to-back huge performances, and ultimately he could come out here and win some weeks for fantasy teams because of how high I think that upside is for him this week. Obviously, DK Metcalf is in this situation, in this territory as well, but with him being a much more highly invested into player on draft day, you're probably considering him more as a sit-and-forget type player to begin with, so that's why I put the spotlight on Tyler Lockett for today's video. Courtland Sutton, this is another one that I think is going to be a sneaky, under-the-radar play. Jerry Jeudy unfortunately suffered an ankle injury. He's going to be out for an extended period of time, although I do expect, and doctors do expect, that he will be back before the end of the season, and he'll be back on the field putting up numbers for our fantasy lineups before this fantasy season is over. But Courtland Sutton is now kind of the reversed role of last year, the clear number 1 option. So whereas Courtland Sutton went down with an injury in 2020, and then Jerry Jeudy was kind of elevated into the spotlight, now Courtland Sutton, who might have already been considered the one by his team in the first place, is now put into that exact situation. He had a really quiet week 1, but he's coming off of a very significant knee injury. He had to get used to the NFL game, adjusted back into things, shake the dust off. And again, that giant secondary, that defense is no joke. And so obviously that had an impact in slowing him down as well, in limiting those numbers. This week, that's not the case. The Jacksonville Jaguars might have one of the worst secondaries in the league. And if you watched how the Texans punished them last week, Brandon Cooks had over 130 yards receiving on just 5 catches. Sutton adds another dynamic to the fact that he can be an elite red zone threat and a player that's a target magnet in that area of the field. So you give me a really talented player who has a week under his belt. He's able to now get adjusted and back into that offensive situation and feel more comfortable with himself on the football field. I think this is a great opportunity this week, and I think that his floor should rise from what we saw in week 1 and heading into week 2 with this really advantageous matchup. Again, he could be a high upside wide receiver 2 play this week, and a player that a notch below Tyler Lockett, but still makes my must start players list this week. Jamar Chase against the Chicago Bears. This is one that I wasn't expecting to have on the board, but Jamar Chase in his first NFL start came right out of the gate running, led the Bengals in offensive targets, and again, his first career start. So we are already seeing him get volume over Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins, and the Chicago defense showed me on Sunday Night Football their weakness is letting up deep passes over the top. Van Jefferson had a 60-plus yard score. Cooper Kupp had a deep score on this defense. Jamar Chase scored a deep pass on the Vikings last week. He has been a very effective fade route runner during his time at LSU, and he came right out of the gate with the Bengals. And again, his first career start. These are very impressive things to see from a receiver this early on. And he ran straight past one of Minnesota's defensive backs and scored one over the top. I think that he has an opportunity to do that same thing again this week against the Bears. And if he can again lead the team in targets, have that volume, he should have a more steady floor than I expected to see him have this early on in the season. Chase Claypool against the Las Vegas Raiders. This was one of the worst secondaries in the league last season. And for a guy in Chase Claypool who had such a difficult matchup in week 1 that ultimately hindered his numbers big time, really the only big productive catch he had was an absolute moss over Tre'Davious White, who is one of the best corners in the league, and he also had a nice 25-yard carry as well. So you're looking at the player who's being treated as the number 1 option by defenses on the Pittsburgh Steelers offense, but what he provides that you don't exactly see from Juju Smith-Schuster and Deontay Johnson, while they're very talented and capable players in their own right, Chase Claypool has that red zone frame. He has the wingspan to go out and be a potential touchdown magnet like he was as a rookie. And I think that that added ceiling is what makes him so favorable for me this week. This is a player, again, who's coming off a down week. So I think a lot of players might be hesitant, a lot of fantasy managers, that is, to go out and put him in their starting lineups. But do not panic, do not fear. He should come out this week and have himself a very nice game against that Raiders secondary. And then lastly here, Jakobi Meyers, the New England Patriots wide receiver against the New York Jets. This is just a situation I like. Mac Jones did struggle with taking pressure and taking hits in that week 1 matchup against the Dolphins, but we knew that Brian Flores was going to send heat his way. We knew he was going to send blitzes and make Mac Jones uncomfortable. That's probably going to be the same case that Robert Saleh is going to try and do against the Pats this week, but he has a lot lesser personnel to take advantage of. And I think that Mac Jones, like we saw Sam Darnold start to do later in the game, he was picking apart that Jets defense. I think Mac will figure things out. He'll get better from week 1 to week 2. Jakobi Meyers led the Pats offense. All players, that is, James White, Jonnu Smith, that running back and tight end position included in this grouping. Jakobi Meyers was the most targeted Patriots wide receiver on the field this past week, although he didn't have the most productive output because Nelson Agholor found the end zone and he wasn't able to escape and make a big run after catch on one of those receptions that he had. So he did catch 6 of his 9 targets, but again, it wasn't anything too productive. I think the matchup, the secondary gets lighter, and it's an easier situation for Jakobi to deal with this week. So those were my 5 must-start wide receivers. I'll see you guys in the outro. Alrighty, let me know down in the comment section below what you thought about my top 5 must-start wide receivers for this week. I think these players are very, very capable. I love the ceiling, and in most of these cases as well, I think that floor takes a significant step up from where I assessed it at for a lot of these guys in week 1. And here moving into week 2, I think that there's a nice balance of both that top end potential and that security blanket where you don't have to feel too concerned about these players ruining your lineup for a week, because again, I love these matchups. I like the talent of all of these players. And I think the offensive situation and their usages should prove to be very vital and very beneficial for their overall fantasy outputs this week. So if you have any questions for me for your week's matchup, for your lineup, trade advice, whatever it may be, make sure to drop that down in the comment section below. I want to be a great tool for you this fantasy season and very interactive. I try and get back to as many of those comments as I can whenever I see them, whenever I've got free time. Subscribe to the channel. We've got content coming out every single day of the week this fantasy season. We'll be putting out a ton of different style videos, a ton of information. Remember, again, I'll be having those must-sit videos coming out this week. I've got more trade targets videos coming, and also some must-sell players that I think that you should be moving off of later on in this fantasy season and trying to equip yourself with better fantasy options in your lineup. So thank you all so much for watching today's video. Again, one more time, drop down, give today's video a like, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace out.